It's time to tune in to Defending the Faith with Frank Harber. Hear the latest about religious liberty.
A win for religious freedom in one of the remaining blockbuster cases facing the U.S. Supreme Court this term.
A legal battle continues for the Little Sisters of the Poor for nearly a decade now.
A street preacher armed with a speaker, a microphone, and a camera strapped to his chest is now banned from the village.
Our founding fathers believed in the separation of church and state, but not for one fleeting moment did they believe in the separation of God and government.
And powerful apologetics. Are you prepared to defend the faith?
I'm convinced unless we trust in God, this nation is finished.
We're facing a new kind of enemy. We're involved in a new kind of warfare, and we need the help of the Spirit of God.
3, 2, 1.
Welcome to another episode of Defending the Faith, and I am Frank Harber. I am your host today, and I am the president and chief legal counsel for the Institute for Christian Defense. And quite simply, we defend the faith. If you're not familiar with our organization, we do legal representation across the country. We have many active cases right now that involve defending religious liberty. And you never know, you never realize what a big deal it's going to be until it's gone, until it's taken away. And at least right now, we live in a country that has freedom of religion. We have free speech. Both those things right there are very, very rare in other countries if you travel abroad. So, here in the United States of America, we have that. And on this show, we talk about why Christianity is true. We defend the faith, and sometimes it's in the legal arena, sometimes it's in the moral arena, the spiritual arena. But today we have a very special guest with us. Jordan Wilson is with us, and I became aware of his story. He's written a book, and it's an amazing testimony. And later in the show, we're going to tell you where you can find this book. Jesus is Greater Than Drugs. Now, I love this book because when you see the book, okay, it's got like 6 mugshots of Jordan from different times when he was in jail. So you already know it's like a serious book, but then it has a parental advisory sticker up at the top left. It's like, whoa, don't read this book. And it's like, yes, I've got to read the book. Now it's got one of those stickers. And then at the bottom, just in case you didn't know, a true story by Jordan Wilson. So what you're going to hear today is not fiction. This is true. And I have read this book, and let me tell you, it's a page turner. In fact, my boys who produced the show, Hunter and Graham, special thanks to y'all. I was introducing them to Jordan in just a second, but they were just astounded of how fast I read this book. And they were like, man, I don't see how you could read the book that fast. And I said, let me tell you, man, this book's a page turner. It's just got incredible stuff. You're just not going to believe what God has done in Jordan Wilson's life. But before we get into that story, we're going to welcome Jordan Wilson. And he is, you'd never know this happened to him because, God has blessed his life and he has a family that I want him to tell us about. But Jordan Wilson, welcome to the show today.
Hey, thanks. I'm glad to be here.
Now tell us about where you live and that beautiful family that you have before we get into the story.
Sure. Yeah. So I live in Henderson, Kentucky with my beautiful wife, Kaylee, and we have 2 children, our 3-year-old son, his name is Knox, and our 1-year-old daughter named Lemon.
Yeah, I was asking him about that earlier because I went to law school with someone named Lemon, but she spelled her name Lemon. And everybody would call her Lemon and she would correct, it's Lemon. Right. So, I was talking to Jordan for the show and I was like getting ready because I was, but his daughter's name, Lemon, his wife is named Kaylee, and they have a growing family. And tell us where you're at right now, because I love the name of the ministry that you work for.
Yeah, so I am the development director for Friends of Sinners, and that's in Owensboro, Kentucky.
Oh, wow. Well, I love Owensboro, Kentucky. I preached there at Bellevue Baptist Church with Pastor Dr. Greg Falls, one of my favorite human beings on the planet. In fact, I will be in Kentucky in June. In the middle of June, we have a big mediation. It's a religious liberty mediation. I've got a couple cases in Kentucky that involve religious liberty, but I will be up in your area. So, Jordan, let's get into your story because people just can't believe it. Let's start at the beginning. Tell us how all this started, because we know we're going to get to these pictures here that are on the book, but you weren't born in jail.
I wasn't born in jail. I was from Madisonville, Kentucky, all Western Kentucky, and I had a good upbringing. I had parents that loved the Lord and had me and my older brother in church. We were active in sports and church. I was even a Boy Scout, right? I was a good kid. Parents were great. And my life was, I really thought of myself as, like we had the model family. I was going to church with my parents 3 times a week. We lived in the suburbs, and my number one sport was baseball. I loved baseball. I was going to do it forever. But when I hit high school age, I started caring a little bit less about the church and my relationship with Christ and being obedient to my parents in sports. And I wanted to do what most kids want to do. I wanted to fit in. I wanted to go to parties. I wanted to see what being drunk was all about. I wanted to see what smoking weed was all about. So I started doing those things little by little. And I started to, enjoy it. I got my first real girlfriend at the age of 16. She was a good girl. I met her in church. But the problem was that she was a distraction for me. I took my eyes off Christ and put them all on her and my relationship with her. And that's, kind of when I started partying. I started lowering my standard on things. I think Peter taught us in the Bible that when you take your eyes off Jesus, you start to sink. And so that's what happened to me. I took my eyes off Christ, started to sink. And so I started doing the whole high school party thing, and it was gripping me without me even knowing it. I didn't know the science behind drinking and drugging. I didn't know that if you take a substance day in, day out for an extended period of time, that it would attach itself to you. I thought that I was just a kid having fun until I tore my ACL in my knee at the gym. I was working out, I tore my knee, and the doctor wrote me a prescription for pain pills. Now, I had done pain pills, at parties, just a couple here and there. I could take it or leave it at the time. But when the doctor wrote me a prescription, I immediately started abusing the pills. The bottle would say, take 1 pill as needed every 6 hours for pain. And I would totally disregard that and take 3. And it gave me this euphoric feeling. I felt like I had energy. Not only did they take the pain of my knee away, but I felt great other than that. And so I was taking those pills for an extended period of time. And eventually the doctor says, okay, Jordan, your knee should be fine. No more pills. And I experienced drug withdrawal for the first time. By this time, high school's over. And I don't know how to handle the pain of withdrawal. You see, when you are using opiates, for instance, for a long period of time, when you immediately stop using those opiates, you feel all kinds of sick. It feels like you have the flu, depression, anxiety, loneliness. Your skin is crawling. Your nerves are shot. So I started feeling that like that. And it became my mission that day that I felt that first withdrawal. It became my mission to never feel like that again. And so what I would do is I'd have to reach out to people who maybe sold pills or do whatever it took, to get those pain pills, which it was all illegal now. I'm not getting them from the doctor. I'm getting them from drug dealers. At this time, I was working at a factory. High school was over. I was working at a factory. I had bought a house. I was trying to, just trying to get by, but I couldn't afford anything because all of my money was going towards these pain pills. My habit got up to $100 a day. And if I didn't have the pills, or didn't have a narcotic in my system, I was too sick to go to work. So I lost my job. I lost my job at the factory. And, I'm 22 years old. I own a home. I have a truck. I have payments. I have $100 a day drug addiction. And so I have no way of making money. So I resort to drug dealing. It was like a total 180. I went from this good kid who, started partying to now I'm a full-time drug dealer. It was crazy. It was like night and day. I didn't even know how I really got to this point, but it was the only way I knew to make guaranteed money to where I could always have my drugs and I could always have money. When I was living that party lifestyle, I met people who sold other drugs and did other things. So someone that I had met brought me into his drug game, which was manufacturing spice. Spice was a relatively new drug 10 years ago, and we manufactured 10 pounds of it at my house every 2 weeks, and that became my full-time job. Everyone who came into my house was either after drugs or money, and if I were laying dead in my living room floor, they would have walked over my dead body to get the drugs or the money. That's what my life had become. Living that lifestyle, I had met other people who had done other drugs, and I quickly became addicted to crystal meth. I started dating a girl who sold crystal meth. So my life is just consumed with drugs. I start shooting up. I use the needle. I'm shooting up. I'm staying up for days on end. My whole family knows what I'm doing, and I don't know how to escape from this lifestyle because I'm miserable. It wasn't fun anymore, but I didn't know how to quit. I was afraid of a detox. I didn't want to experience the pain of withdrawal. And if I would try and go a day without using, I'd get so sick that I would immediately go right back to it. And I remember there was one day in the middle of my addiction, my brother called me. Like I said before, I have a brother. He's 5 years older than me. And he was someone that I had always looked up to. I'd always wanted my brother to think of me as a winner. He paved my way through high school. People knew me as Josh's younger brother. He taught me how to pick up chicks and taught me how to fight, all these things. I really looked up to him. And he called me and said, "Listen, Jordan, I know what you're doing. We all know what you're doing. You got to stop, man. You were meant for greatness." And I told my brother, I said, I don't know how to stop. This is how I pay my bills. I sell drugs to pay my bills so I can eat. And my brother quoted the scripture, and I'm paraphrasing, but he said, God provides food for the birds of the air and clothes the lilies of the field. He'll take care of you too. But I didn't have the faith. I didn't believe. So I kept on doing what I was doing. And a few months later, 9 police officers raided my house. They busted down my door. Somebody told the police what I was doing, and they came and raided my house. So I was busted for trafficking in synthetic drugs and possession. I got an attorney, and I had to serve 3 months in county jail, with it being my first offense. Thankfully, 10 years ago, trafficking in synthetic drugs was a Class A misdemeanor. And the reason it was a misdemeanor was because they didn't know how to specify. They didn't know how to classify the drug. I think now it's a felony, so I'd be serving much more time. But thankfully, it was a Class A misdemeanor, so I had to serve 3 months in county jail, which it was the best of a bad situation. Jail is awful. There's tons of wickedness in there, but I made it through and was released to a long-term Christ Center program called Friends of Sinners. It's where I work now. It's a great program. I stand by it, and I stood by it back then. The problem with me back then was my heart didn't change. I did not want to change. I didn't want to feel like a loser anymore. I didn't want to have a needle in my arm, but I was not ready to surrender my life to Christ. So I made it in that program 4 months and relapsed on drugs, and they kicked me out, and I had to go back to jail. This process of jail, rehab to homelessness, because I lost my house while I was locked up while I was in rehab. This process continued for 2 or 3 years to where I thought, okay, I'm done. I'm done trying to get clean. I'm done trying to get sober because I've done it all. I did medicine, psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, inpatient rehab, outpatient rehab. Nothing ever worked. So I gave up. I was done. I thought, okay, I'm just going to use as hard as I can until I die. That was my plan. I knew that I wouldn't see 30 years old. Even people that I had used with said, Jordan, you are not going to make it much longer. But I didn't care. I felt no purpose in my life. I thought that I was always going to be this way and that I was going to die this way. Until 6 years ago, I was kicked out of the place that I was living. I had nowhere to go. And so I drove aimlessly, not knowing where I was going, and I wound up at my mom's house. I knocked on her door, and I said, Mom, I need a place to crash. Now, my mom is a praying woman. She loves the Lord. She loves me. And she could see that I was messed up on drugs. And she said, Jordan, I will let you crash here, but you have to agree to go to rehab again. Now, this would make my 7th time in drug rehab. And I thought that that was just a bad idea because it didn't work for me. However, I needed a place to stay that night, so I agreed. And I'm telling you, when I walked through the doors of my mom's house, the atmosphere was sweet. There was no shame, condemnation. I felt like I could breathe for the first time in years, and I didn't exactly know what that was. I walked in her house, I sat on the couch, and my mom looked me right in the eye, and she said, Jordan, I have been praying and fasting for you for 2 weeks. My mom did not eat a bite of food for 2 weeks in prayer that God would set me free from addiction. That so happened to be on Good Friday. Nothing necessarily happened on that day other than the fact that I showed up at my mom's house. But 2 days later, Easter Sunday, 2016, my parents aren't married. My dad heard that I was in town and said, Jordan, why don't you come to church with me for Easter? I said, no, Dad, I'm detoxing. I'm sick. He said, well, Sunday's my birthday. It's also going to be my birthday. Would you go for my birthday? I was 27 years old. I didn't have a birthday gift from my dad. So I said, okay, for your birthday, I will go with you to church. And it turned out to be a gift for me because there was an altar call. The pastor said, if there's anyone who wants to give their heart to Christ, if your life's been messed up, if you need change, come down to this altar and receive freedom. So I ran down to that altar. I surrendered 100% of my heart to Christ, and I had never been the same since that day. I surrendered. Now, God is sovereign, right? Like I still had a ton of drugs in my system, and I still had to detox. So I closed my eyes, said the prayer, opened my eyes, a saved man. My life was forever changed. I was new. But I went back to my mom's house and detoxed hard for a week as we waited on a bed in a recovery program. We found a place called the Isaiah House in Central Kentucky. It was long-term, Christ-centered, residential. And I went to that program just 100% all the way in. They put me to work there. I had to work for free for 4 months on their landscape crew. So all day long, I would hold a weed eater and work for free. But I was committed to the Lord. I was going to be the best weed eater that they had ever seen. They eventually promoted me to case management. They saw that I was taking the program seriously, that I was walking closely with Christ. They started paying me. I eventually graduated that program and was promoted to public relations. I was asked to give a speech at their graduation, and the CEO was in attendance, and he loved my speech and said, Jordan, you're going to public relations. I didn't even know what that was, but I said, okay, because he was the boss. And that's where I found my niche. You know, I love God. I love people. I'm an extrovert. As you can see, I love to talk. And so that turned into a career. I started going back to college and eventually became the public relations manager for the Isaiah House. That's about the time that I met my wife. About a year later, we had a child. And it was 2 years 3 years into public relations, 1 year into the management position, to where my wife and I started feeling this stirring in our spirit, like God was calling us to something else. Now, on the outside, nothing needed to change. I made good money, had insurance. We had a great apartment, great babysitter for our child. I was established there, and I was on the fast track to becoming an executive staff member at the Isaiah House. But when you feel God inside you, you got to listen. You got to be obedient. So we went to our prayer closet, and we prayed, like, God, what are you calling us to? And lo and behold, it was Friends of Sinners. I called the executive director and asked if they could use a marketing department, and he said yes. And 3 months later, I was hired in at Friends of Sinners as their development director. So I took that position. That's where I still am today. July will be 3 years that I'm in that position. And when I first started the job, I started writing my book. I started writing in the little free time that I had. Started writing my book, and 6 months ago we published it. So now I'm a published author. I'm the development director of Friends of Sinners. My wife and I, we've got 2 kids. We purchased a home in Henderson, Kentucky. And about a year and a half ago, I accepted a part-time position at my church as their youth director. So I preach every Wednesday night. I'll be preaching tonight to a group of high school kids and middle school kids. And God's just doing amazing, amazing work in my life. About 3 months ago, God put it on my heart to donate a copy of my book to every jail, prison, and juvenile facility in the country. So we've been doing that. It's taken off. We're doing all the marketing through Facebook and Instagram, but over half the country is financially covered, and 12 states have already received my book. So God is moving. People are getting saved. And I'm just so excited about what God has in the future, because we have not slowed down in 6 years. God has just taken off in my life, and it's really mind-blowing.
Now, I read your book, and now you work for Friends of Sinners now, but didn't you get kicked out of there like maybe twice?
3 times. I was kicked out of that program 3 times. But that's God's goodness. You know what I mean? Like, my plan, 8 years ago was to graduate that program by the skin of my teeth, not live for the Lord, get some random job, maybe in the coal mines or a factory, maybe attend church on Easter and Mother's Day. But God's plan was different. God's plan was I was going to give my heart completely over to Christ, never use again, and come back as in a leadership position.
So let's back up and talk about the pills and the danger of all this, because I know that people are listening that they might be going through it themselves, but most people listening to this probably know someone and wonder how to help them. So I'll tell you a story, Jordan. So my wife had a friend, and she called and was just talking about complaining, needing prayer because she'd run out of her pain pills. And my wife said, well, man, if you lived up here, I could give you mine, because I went to the dentist and, my tooth kept hurting. And she lived about 3 hours away. Next thing we know, she was there. And yeah. And so she stayed with us, and, my wife gave her, a couple of the pills. But after she left, we noticed they were gone. I mean, the bottle was empty, and there's some other stuff. And long story short, this person died, like a couple of years. They did something to their liver by taking so many of these pills that, they died a premature death. I mean, they're younger than me. And I mean, this was at least, 15 years ago. And I mean, it was a shocker. These pills aren't anything to play with, are they?
Oh no. Geez. Even pills from the doctor, right? Taking long-term have significant effects on the organs of the body. I was taking 20 pills a day. And I've got some healthcare workers in my family. And when they learned that I was taking 20 pills a day, they were horrified, thinking, oh no, you're going to die. But not only that, but the pills now that people are purchasing on the street are not what people think they're getting. These drugs are being labeled one thing, but they are cut with a very dangerous drug called fentanyl.
Yeah.
It's all over the country. They are being pressed to look like one pill, but they are not that pill. Overdose deaths in the United States have reached record-breaking numbers this year of over 100,000 bodies.
my understanding is fentanyl can cause all kinds of problems, breathing difficulties and stuff. So what, if somebody goes and buys an illicit drug, do they mask it by cutting it with the fentanyl? Is there some kind of, I mean,
That's exactly.
They're tricking them somehow. What's happening on this?
So apparently it's not just pain pills that these dealers are putting fentanyl in. They're putting it on marijuana. They're putting it on methamphetamine, which doesn't make sense because that's not the high people are looking for. But what I've been told is that fentanyl has come into the United States so cheap that these dealers are wanting to give their users such an extra high to keep them returning to them. But what it's doing is it's killing them. It's killing them. You know, for someone who doesn't use opiates, it's not going to take much for them to die. You know, sadly, I've worked in recovery for over 5 years. So I've seen many people my age and younger die from overdose. And I have a friend who did not use opiates. He passed away recently. And we believe that the drug that he was using was cut with fentanyl. And that's what took his life.
Have you heard the stories about, just high school kids going and buying weed, thinking they were doing something innocent, almost like, going buying beer with a fake ID and dying. So I hear reports of this all the time, but it doesn't seem to be in the media too much, but I mean, it's alarming.
It's alarming. It's horrifying. I recently received a text message that someone that I know, they died. They took one pill. They didn't, I guess they didn't know what it was. And this guy was in his 20s. They took one pill and it took his life. He died. Happens all the time. Yeah. Happens every day.
The consequences to what we're talking about today is not a game. And then also too, these things can take a good kid, because when you read Jordan's book, you'll understand, he had good parents, he had a good family, was a good kid, and he got caught in a vortex that spiraled him down. So, what was it like the first time you get arrested and go to jail? You had to know, I don't fit here. I mean, what was that like?
I remember, so the first time, I was, 19 years old. I knew that, this was not the right path for me. But I kept getting arrested, right? Like, it wasn't long after that I caught my first DUI. And it wasn't long after that I caught my second DUI. And that's when I got busted for, trafficking. But I had to detox in jail. And that was a horrible feeling because jail is wicked. It's full of bullies and predators and wicked people that prey on weakness. And so when you're detoxing from drugs, you look weak. So I had to do the best I could to look like a tough guy so that I didn't get taken advantage of in this situation. And so when you're detoxing from drugs in that situation, it's very scary, and so like it got to I realized like, how did I get here? What happened to me? Like I thought, I was a cocky kid, you know what I mean? Like I was in sports and weightlifting. I thought that I was invincible. Really. I thought that drug addicts don't look like me. They don't come from my neighborhood. They don't have my life. That's not for me. But I didn't know that there is really no discrimination with addiction. It doesn't matter your background, what your last name is, how much money you have, or your social status. Addiction can take anyone if played with.
And it's going to take it all too, because eventually, if you read your book, you're walking around with 2 trash bags, and you got everything you have in the world is in those trash bags.
Yep. Yeah, it took everything from me: relationships, confidence, health, you name it. It took it all because everything, and this, everything's spiritual. Everything's spiritual in this world. Everything's spiritual, and drugs are demonic. They are demonic. There are demonic spirits attached to those because when you first take them, it seems great. I feel great. I feel confident. I have this energy. I'm outgoing, but that quickly turns on you. and it's not fun anymore. Once that fun wears off, you have to have this drug to feel normal. Mm-hmm. That's sick. That's not right.
So your story is particularly fascinating because you come from a good family. You're a good kid. You're handsome. I mean, you're popular. Everybody likes you. But then there's this component of the prescription drugs. Okay. So you get in trouble. And then there's illicit drugs. And then in the book, you get these strips, which you felt like, hey, I think this is going to be the answer. But then you started selling the strips for drugs and stuff. Talk about the strips. And I felt like just reading it, that vortexed you even further down the tube.
Yeah. So, like I said, I had a good family, and they knew before it got too far, they knew that, hey, Jordan's addicted to these pills. We need to help him get off of these pills. So we found what was called a Suboxone clinic. Suboxone is a narcotic that doctors can prescribe patients who suffer from opiate addiction. It gives the user the feeling of opiates. You don't have to feel the pain of withdrawal, but at the same time, you're addicted to it. It's a narcotic, so you're kind of exchanging one thing for another. And that's what I did. When I went to the Suboxone clinic, I was taking 20 pills a day. I stopped taking the 20 pills a day and started using it. It just took one strip to last you all day. You would feel it all day. But that quickly felt like, this isn't enough. This isn't enough for me. And plus, I had the addict's mindset. So what I did is I failed the drug test and I convinced my doctor that I needed 60 of those strips for the month instead of 30. So what I would do is the days that I felt like it was enough, I would take an extra, and then I would sell the other strips that I got. That's the addict's mindset. Because what it is, it's an addictive substance, right? It's an addicting substance that can certainly be abused. And that's what I was doing. And not only that, but I was also selling it. So that pushed me even further because it wasn't just something to help me. It was something that was hurting me too.
So I want to tell you a story. So not a lot of people know this about me, but my dad was a drug addict, and he didn't start out that way. He was a business guy, but he drank all the time. He drank so much he became an alcoholic, and he hurt his liver. And the doctor basically said, you can't drink anymore or you're going to die. And, it became such a serious thing around our house that, I was put on alert to tell my mom if my dad drank a beer. So my dad would drink these Kerrs beers, the Silver Bullet. And my dad told me they were RC. And so dad was still, he was still doing that. And then he got busted one time when a guy walked in with the Kerrs, and I went, hey, you like RC. My mom caught it. And but my dad would graduate, though, from that because he couldn't do it. So he had to find another thing. So next he jumped to marijuana, and that led to new things until one day, my dad was high all the time. I didn't recognize him. I'd come from home from school, and he would just be, I didn't know who he was. He was like a wild animal sometimes. And then eventually he moved out of our house and he moved into a pasture that we owned. And he just lived out in the open and eventually got him a trailer. But he lived outside of civilization, and, people said that he dealt drugs and stuff. I don't know if he did. He told me before he died at 54. And, he had a lot of health problems and complications, obviously from doing that. But, my dad left when I was around, 8 years old. I saw him one more time when I was 14. And then I didn't see him till right before he died when I was 30. That was it. So, drugs took my dad. And so, so in school and stuff, I probably could have easily got hooked on this kind of stuff, but I knew what it did to my dad. And, I just wish that, my dad would have snapped out of it like you, because I feel like I'd still have him, today. And I know that there's people who are listening that it might be their child that are listening to this program. It could be It could be their dad. It could be somebody. Jordan, tell us today what we can do to help them. Give us some advice. Give us some wisdom, because I love what you do. I love the position that you're in, because you speak as one who has authority, because you've been there. So could you just speak to our whole audience and tell us what to do?
First thing is, I would say, is to pray and fast. I think that prayer obviously is powerful and effective, but also combine it with fasting. I feel like us as American Christians, myself included, we overlook fasting too much, too often. Many of us do. And that's what my mom had to do for me to show up. She felt in her spirit that God said, start to fast. So consider fasting. Not only that, be careful on the way that you love the addict, because you can absolutely love someone to death. You have to be careful. There's a fine line with helping and enabling. We see it all the time. I just want to help them. They need $20 for food or for gas. Well, then, you know what? Then you fill up their tank, or you take them to the grocery store. You never give an addict money. So you have to be very careful with how you help an addict. But first and foremost, continue to enter that prayer closet. Consider fasting and be completely transparent. Some people are afraid to share their true feelings of how your behavior makes me feel. It's okay to love a person at a distance. It's okay to not allow someone in your home. It's okay to not give someone certain things. Because I see it all the time. People do that, but it just keeps them in the cycle, letting them crash at your house with no consequences. Thankfully, in Kentucky, we have something called Casey's Law. I'm sure you've heard of it. But Casey's Law is where you can go to the courts and prove that your son, daughter, wife, sister, whatever, is in danger of themselves or someone else because of their addiction. And the court will mandate long-term recovery for that person. And if they don't do that recovery program, they'll have to serve a year in jail. So that's something to look into. But I would say 50 out of our states have recovery programs. Look into what's out there. You're going to find some places that bill insurance, some places that don't, but there's going to be the right place for your loved one nearby.
Okay, so a friend of sinners, what do y'all do? Is this a place where somebody can send somebody to where you're at now?
Sure. Yeah. So we treat both men and women at separate locations. And the cool thing about Friends of Sinners, one thing that really is so attractive about us is we don't bill insurance, which is unheard of, really, in addiction recovery, because insurance pays so much. However, we're Christ-centered, and I've seen firsthand what insurance providers can do to the Christ-centered aspect of a program. So we'll never have to face those issues. We don't bill insurance. We do bill our clients $90 a week, $95 a week for rent and programming. But currently, we do have a waiting list. We have 35 men and 15 women. Our men's program is 18 months, and our women's program is 12 months. And we do have a waiting list. And sadly to say, if we had a 500-bed facility, we could fill it within a week or two. That's just
wow.
The demand. That's just how powerful addiction is and the need. So right now we do have about a 4-month waiting list, but I don't want that to discourage anyone, because that's subject to change every day. Typically when somebody wants treatment, they want it then and there. They're not willing to wait. So if someone did want to get into our program, they could certainly fill out an application and get themselves on the list.
That's awesome. And I urge everyone to, if you're in this situation, to reach out to them. Also, Jordan, God is using him. He's at a church now, but Jordan, are you available to come speak at people's churches as well?
Yeah, absolutely. I do that quite often. I speak at churches, jails, recovery rallies, schools, you name it. And simply for the fact of, yes, I am busy. So if I can make it, I will go. But That's because I believe at the end of my life, when God says, Jordan, I set you free from addiction, what did you do with it? My answer can't be nothing. I'm going to say, Lord, I went. They asked, I went. I wrote about you. I talked about you. I preached about you. God didn't save me for me to keep it to myself.
All right. Well, it has been awesome having you on, Jordan. So tell us how we can find you and how people can get a copy of this book.
Sure. Yeah. So I'm on Facebook, Jordan Wilson. I'm on Instagram. I am Jordan Wilson. I'm on TikTok, The Real Wilson Jordan. And then, of course, my book is exclusive on Amazon. When you go to Amazon, click on books, type in the title, Jesus greater than symbol, drugs, and you can find it no problem. And then if you're interested in Friends of Sinners, our website is friendofsinner.org. And that's all singular, friendofsinner.org.
Well, you've been listening to Jordan Wilson. He's absolutely awesome. He lives in Kentucky. He's a resource for the kingdom of God. He's powerful. You will hear more and more about this young man. I mean, God has got his hand on him. God is using him. It's been a blessing, Jordan, to have you on the show. Also, if you want to find more resources about us, we have a new free ebook called Objection Overruled on our website at defendingthefaith.law, and it's responding to the top objections to Christianity. And so it's the new book that we're offering right now for free. Well, God bless everybody. Please, 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 please share this episode with someone you know who has a family member that is struggling with this. By all means, share this episode with someone you know that is struggling with this, because just exposing them to the story of Jordan Wilson will help. This is someone, if you read the book, you'll find out he was at the absolute bottom and he made it. And because he can make it, you can too. And the power of God that rescued him is also available to rescue you. You can count on it. Well, God bless you, and we will see you in the next episode of Defending the Faith.